Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar titled Becoming a CX Hero, the top 5 customer experience mistakes that cost you customers. I'm David Chan, CEO of Intellext, where we are making real estate social. Next up is Priscilla Huang, Head of Experience Design and Digital Analytics at AIA Insurance. With over 18 years of multidisciplinary skills in tech, UX, and product, Priscilla is passionate about combining all three to craft simple yet delightful user experiences that produce strategic business outcomes. Now, Priscilla, thank you for talking to us now about the top 5 customer experiences that people should avoid.
Thank you, David. Yeah, and Dave, I couldn't agree with you more that customer journey is absolutely critical in framing our hero's journey. And in order to create that delightful customer experience, I'm going to share with you these 5 top CX mistakes you must never make again. Right. Mistake 1 is not having data on hand for your CX teams to learn fast and respond quickly. So how many companies do we know that rely on disconnected legacy systems that don't even talk to each other, right? Because like Dave said, they're all siloed. And because of this, it's not uncommon to see whole teams that are being dedicated to this tedious task of manually extracting, consolidating, and then mapping data into Excel files for analysis. But by the time this data is finally reported, that data is often, it's already outdated and it's irrelevant. How then can we expect our CX teams to stay responsive and learn quickly? And while talking to users, it's great for gathering feedback, yeah? But sometimes we just need simple observations for quick learning. And in such cases, conducting full-blown user research, right? It's just too time consuming, it takes up to 2 months. So instead, CX teams, they need an automated and continuous feedback loop integrated into their workflow to respond quickly. So what we need to do here, we need to automate that data collection process, and we need to insist on real-time data for our CX teams, right? So that they can always stay on the pulse of their hero's journey. The second cardinal sin of CX is passively waiting for your customer to give you feedback. One of the biggest fears of any brand is managing customer complaints on social media. So don't just rely on damage control when this happens, because your brand reputation, it takes a huge hit that you may not always recover from. So to avoid this embarrassment, simply just proactively seek out your customers' feedback, right? That way, when you hear negative feedback, you get to contain it, you get to control it internally, instead of letting your frustrated customers lash out on social media. And as a bonus, if you do manage to resolve your customers' pain points, you'll not only improve your hero's journey, you'll probably convert that detractor into a loyal brand ambassador.
I could not agree with you more, Priscilla. I think tying social media into your brand's reputation is really important. It makes a lot of sense to me. And especially what I was just previously mentioning, that Gen Z and millennials really do care about social media, and they really do want to hear customer feedback right away from the brand.
Absolutely, David. And just because you mentioned this, I'll give you a nugget of gold here, right? This one tip, applying this one tip at AIA, this raised our App Store rating from 1.2 stars to 4 stars in just 2 weeks, right? And as you can see over here, right? We had way more ratings, and we had, most importantly, they were all positive ratings that, they managed to trigger Apple's rating algorithms, and they increased our app rating by over 3 times. So I wish we had time to cover this today, but if there's enough interest from the panelists, from the audience, I would love to share the strategy and the playbook behind this one, because it's so easy, but it's so effective. Yeah, guys, if you want to hear about this, just leave a note in the comments or something, let David know. I'm sure he'll organize something. But meanwhile, let's talk about mistake 3. So this is something that happens a lot in small companies where everyone is encouraged to give their opinions. And this is great. But this also happens in large companies where the hippo, or the highest paid person in the room, he makes an offhand comment, and then everybody rushes to build it. So I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this, right? So while trusting your gut instinct isn't always a bad thing, decisions based on bias and subjectivity means that we are building for our hippo rather than our hero. So rather than argue with speculative opinions, we should let data lead the way. combine data from what your customers are doing and thinking and use that to legitimize your decisions. By anchoring your decision in data-driven insights, you can avoid the conflict with your hippo while still providing assurance that your decisions are grounded in solid data. As the saying goes, our hero is always right. Let data show you the way. But having data alone, it isn't enough. You need to know what to do with it. So for example, let's look at a common CX metric, right? It's called time spent on page. So what's a good gauge of this? Is 3 seconds too short? Does it mean that your users are not engaged, and should you try to make them stay longer? But what if I told you that this metric is actually a reflection of how user-friendly your product is, that your product is so intuitive that users know exactly how to find what they need and complete their tasks and just leave in 3 seconds? Once you see it this way, perhaps 3 seconds isn't that bad after all. So now that even if you know how to interpret the metric, you still need to know what to aim for. How should you improve this metric? What do you benchmark against? And what is the industry norm for products like your own? So don't just guess the answer. Make sure your CX team is armed with actionable insights to steer them towards the right direction. Again, like they say, if you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. So earlier you saw that there are 2 types of data, the doing data and the thinking data. Popular tools like Google Analytics, Mixpanel, Crazy Egg, Hotjar, they only measure the doing part, but not the thinking part, right? It doesn't tell you what your customers are thinking. So for example, let's revisit that metric again, time spent on page. This analytics, it tells us 3 seconds is acceptable within the industry. But does it mean that your product is really easy to use? Does it mean that, just because, does it not just mean that your customers could have grudgingly learned to work around your painful workflows? How do you know that they are not silently hating on your product? And if that is so, what happens when the next product comes along and it removes that pain point for them? Unfortunately, you're going to lose those customers. So experience is more than just numbers. You need to understand how your heroes truly feel in order to empathize with their needs and make meaningful improvements to your product before they churn. So these are the 5 mistakes, but before that, I'm going to leave you the thought here. A brand today, it's no longer what we tell the customer it is what the customers tell each other it is. So what kind of experience will you build for your brand? What will your heroes say about your brand?
Well, I want to thank you all for joining us, and a great job by the panelists. Remember, we will send you out the link to this recording when we're done, and also a copy of the wonderful ebook that Calixto has written about the customer experience. Thank you all. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the week.